Hey there! In this video I'm going to show you a new operator in JavaScript, and that's the spread operator. So the new spread operator is a very convenient way to expand elements of an array in places like arguments in function calls. So let me show you what I mean by expand elements. Let's first create a simple function which simply adds for values, let's say for ages. So function add for ages. And I'm going to call them A, B, C, and D. And we simply return the sum of all of these elements, plus C and plus D. Alright, so let's now test if this actually works. Sum1, because I'm going to use this multiple times, so I'm going to start with sum1. So add 4 ages, and let's say 18, 30, 12, and 21. Okay, and then I'm going to console log this sum. Okay, and it's 81. Now imagine that we had these 4 numbers in an array instead of, for example, 4 different variables. So how would we pass that entire array into that function? So let's start with ES5. And the first thing is, of course, to create the ages array. So 18, 30, 12, and 21. Now remember that we have the bind, call, and apply methods. And we used the bind and the call methods already, but we didn't really use the apply method. And remember that the apply method, what it does is to receive an array. And it calls the function that the apply method is used on using the elements of the array as the arguments. And so we're going to make use of that here. Okay, so let me show you how that works. So now it's sum2, and we say add 4 ages, and then we use the apply method. And remember, we have to specify the this variable as well, such as in bind and call. But we're not really interested in that, and so we can just say that it's null. Okay, and then we pass ages into here. And so once again, what the apply method will do is to take this array and then call this function here using these elements of the array as the arguments, which is exactly what we want to do here, right? Because again, this function doesn't receive an array, but instead it receives these 4 arguments here. So let's now see if sum2 is also 81, which it should be. Sum2. And alright, so this worked. But once again, there is a better way of doing this in ES6. And it's as simple as this. So now I'm going to call it mag3, and we now are going to use the spread operator. So add 4 ages and the spread operator, and then simply ages. And that's it. And this is what expanding means. What this operator here does is to expand this array into its components. So in this case 18, 30, 12, and 21. So this here is now exactly the same as writing 18, 30, 12, and 21, such as we did here in this case. So this is what the spread operator does. And now we're just gonna test it. And this is of course not max3, I don't know why I did that. So it's sum3. And now it should be 81 again, and it is. So of course, this method here works exactly the same, but here it's more easy to write, more easy to read, and also to memorize. So instead of using this apply and null, you can simply use the new spread operator to call this function like this with these arguments. And there are actually more use cases, for example, for joining arrays. So imagine that we have 2 arrays. One is for the Smith family. So going back to our person examples here. And so we have John, Jane, and then mark. And we have an array for another family. Let's say Miller. And in here we have Mary, Bob, and Anne. Now to join these two arrays, we can once again use the spread operator. So now it's a big family. And so we say that we want to spread the family Smith and the family Miller. So what this does is to expand this array into the three single elements. It basically takes them out of the array and puts them here. And the same, of course, with family Miller. And just to make sure that it works, so here we have the array with all of the elements. And we can also just put another element here in the middle, for example, or somewhere else. Let's say that there's a new element like a new child. Then we can, of course, put it right here like this. And now here it is. And yet another use case is that we can actually use this on other structures, so not just array, but for example also on a node list. So remember, the node list is what the query selector all returns. So let's see an example of that. So I'm going to select this heading here, okay, and then the boxes, and then I want to change the text color of all of these four elements to let's say to purple. So I'm going to start with the heading, so H document.query selector, and it's an H1 element. So let me show it to you. So it's an H1 element. So I'm not going to select it by class or by ID, but simply by its element name. And so we don't need the point or the hash symbol here. Okay, and now we also want the boxes. And we did this one before, so it's just like this. And now we could, of course, change the text color of this element and then loop through all of these here and change the text colors as well. But it's easier if we simply put all of them in the same structure, right? And so we can use the spread operator here once again, because remember, they don't only work on arrays, but also on other structures like node lists, which is what we have here. So let's do that. I'm going to call it all, and then we want H, and we want to spread the boxes. Okay, because H is not a node list, it's simply a node, because it's a query selector and not query selector all. But in here we have this node list, and so we use the spread operator to expand it, and then we have the four elements all here stored in this node list in the all variable. And so now all we need to do is to transform this node list into an array, and then we can loop through it with the for each method. And as we learned in the last lecture or one of the previous lectures, it's very easy to convert the node list to an array, right? So we simply write array and then from, which is the new method, and all, and this returns an array. And so now on this we can use, of course, the for each method. And we want the current element, and now I'm sure that you're already getting used to this new syntax that we've been using all the time now, which is the arrow function. So the current is the argument to the function, and now what we want to do is to change the style of each of the elements. So current.style.color, which is the CSS property for styling text colors. And now I simply use the CSS color name purple. And that's it. That's all we have to do to change all of these colors. So let's see, and it works. So they're all purple now. Not very beautiful, but that's not what matters here, right? So these were a couple of use cases for the new spread operator. and I hope that you see how useful it can be. So now let's move on together.